Hey folks, thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of Vinyl and Vision. This is episode 44 with my very special guest, Dan Boucher. I was going to say the whole name. Dan Boucher, that's good. So Dan is probably best known for being a longtime member of the band Neptune, a Boston-based band. They have released a new record. Is that fair to say? New record? We discuss why I'm in question of that right now in the show, so you'll hear all about it. But I purchased this from Dan because he runs the record label Wrong Whole Archival Bureau, and they released this new recording of Neptune's Mother of Millions. So, as a matter of fact, you'll probably be listening to a selection from this album right now called Colborne Bells. Colborne Bells. I don't know how to pronounce this. It's a great album, it's a really cool cassette release. We did discuss on the show, and so you will hear if you listen, that they were considering releasing this on vinyl, but considering the amount of artwork that they put into just the cassette alone, the idea of putting this on vinyl would probably be a little difficult and a little costly. So this is the way that they have gone about doing it. I know that they had some limited edition type of releases of this on the Bandcamp site, but it's a very cool album. If you don't like tapes or if you don't have a cassette player, you can always buy the digital, which is also on the Wrong Whole Archival Bureau's Bandcamp page, which will be linked in the show notes. So if you are interested, just go there, just click on that, and it'll take you to the shop where you can find other releases that Wrong Whole has been doing, such as this one by Infrastructure Rot, Mute City. Here, this is so cool. I love this old font, right? TK. And Dan was actually kind enough to gift me these cool cassettes, and I think for the reason to show you what kind of work they do here. These are really cool, kind of really elaborately packaged cassettes. Dan is also in a band called Golden Shores, which is this one, which is also super cool. I believe all of these are available still currently at the Bandcamp page, so go check that out. I have to say thank you to Dan. I have to say thank you to Dan for not only doing the show and talking with me about the Ex+Tom Cora's Scrabbling at the Lock, but obviously all of these cassettes, which, to be honest with you, I haven't been able to listen to all of them yet, but I'm getting through it. I have a lot of stuff to listen to, and also for these vinyl releases from Neptune. I don't know if this is available anymore through the website. I know that he put up a few very limited editions of these on the last Bandcamp Friday, so please go check and look to see if they're there. If not, I'm sure you can still pick up the digital. But I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Dan. This is really, really very nice of you to send these to me, and I really appreciate it. So aside from that, let's get right into it, because it's kind of a little lengthy one. We did a lot of talking that night, and yeah, I love the album. The Ex+Tom Cora's Scrabbling at the Lock. It's a pretty good one. I'm definitely going to keep it in my wheelhouse and refer back to it at some points. So yeah, just please do all the things you do with the internet. Like, share, subscribe, comment, subscribe, share, like, comment, share, rate, review. There's the last ones. Rate and review, please. And yeah, enjoy the show. Thanks. So, but yeah, I would recommend it. So you never went on tour in South America then, huh?
We So Neptune had an offer to do 5 shows in Brazil,
Hmm.
and we really really wanted to go, but so it was really hard with Neptune because the instruments are all scrap metal. It's all stuff that like we can't just show up somewhere and like rent metal
Rent gear.
guitars.
Yeah.
So the cost just we would have ended up losing so much money. And I mean, our whole you know thing as a band was we never really cared. We would have done it just to do it, just to go
Mm-hmm.
to people. But we just couldn't afford it. It was crazy
Right.
expensive. So,
Yeah, that sucks. Geez,
yeah.
so you don't run into that same problem traveling in Europe then? I mean, because I didn't realize that wasn't thinking about the handmade instruments and like how much they're like just basically like scrap metal.
Right. We didn't run into that. My friend Jason, who is the guy who founded Neptune, he is, he's part scientist, part musician. And what he did before our first European tour was he figured out the exact dimensions of the luggage restrictions, and then he built cases that fit, that would be accepted, that
Hmm.
the dimensions, and then he built new instruments that would fit inside those cases. um, but a lot of times we got blown over a couple of times to do festivals or whatnot. So I think for the most part on European tours we would break even. But yeah, so actually touring Europe was fairly easy for us, and we found this guy by the name of Heiss, and he had a like his whole business. We actually found this guy through the X's sound band Gert,
Hmm.
um, and he actually booked the X's first tour. So he had his business was he had a bunch of Sprinter vans, and he had a storage space where he had like numerous amplifiers, drum kits, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he allowed us to leave a lot of our instruments there, and that made things a lot easier. So that's kind of how we ended up touring Europe so much. So
So nothing similar like to that in South America yet.
no, no, not yet. My current bandmate, I play in this band called Lay Feeling with one of my really close friends, Tom, and he was playing in a band with this guy Juan Pablo, and Juan Pablo lives in Bogota, in Colombia. And so Tom has already gone to Bogota, and he was like, "We have to go there and record a record." And I'm like, "Yes, let's do."
Hmm.
So that would be a little easier because we wouldn't have to bring so much stuff because his friend there is a musician and has
Hmm.
stuff that we could do.
Right.
So, a little bit of a pipe dream, but it might
Hmm.
happen at some point.
Yeah. Cool. So tell me now, because we started talking about Neptune already. I was just kind of curious. I did a little bit of the research and like, I couldn't see exactly like when you joined the band. I mean, you weren't a founding member, is that correct?
I was not a founding member, no. So Neptune, it was really kind of an awesome story. I was a big fan of the band. I had seen them once because I went to a show at the Middle East to see this band Turkish Delight, who were
Hmm.
phenomenal Boston band, one of my favorites. And their guitarist was Neptune's first drummer. And I knew of Neptune, like I had read about them and I'd read about the instruments, and I was like, this sounds really cool. And I saw them, and I was like, shit, this band is awesome. Like it really was a spectacle, to see like the sculptural instruments, and they're always really performative. So that really drew me to them. And then uh, the pretty much most of the lineup kind of went off. Most of the original lineup kind of went off to do other things, and then
Hmm.
a good friend of mine named Jessica Rylan. I don't know if you're familiar with her stuff, but she's a synth builder, and she's just kind of all around awesome person. Um,
Okay.
she joined the band, and I was really psyched. I was like, "Whoa, a friend of mine's in Neptune! How cool!" And I really loved that lineup. And then there was another one after that, and then a friend of mine by the name of John Manson, who was in a really really good band in Boston called the Grand Island, called me once, and it was kind of a weird story. My father was really ill and in the hospital, and he was like, "Hey, look, I know this is not a good time for you, but we need a percussionist in Neptune, and would you want to join?" And I was like, "Fucking A, man. Yes, this is the best time ever. Like, this is great." So it was weird when I joined, I really kind of thought I was only going to do one show. I was just going to be the fill-in percussionist. And, at the end of that one show, I, pretty much was like, all right, I want to be in this band.
Yeah.
So I guess really it was the fifth lineup.
So what year was that approximately?
2000. My first show was May 5th, 2000, which was Jason, who is the founder of Neptune. He was studying sculpture and performance art at Mass Art, and my first show with the band was his thesis show. So we played in this art gallery, and it was so much fun. We only had 2 rehearsals before. I only had 2 rehearsals with the band before playing this show. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know the songs, but we just went for it, and it was kind of awesome. It was, it was great. I kept almost falling over. I wasn't really used to standing up and playing.
Yeah.
I've been a drummer my whole life. And the gallery floor had, the gallery had this like nicely buffed floor. And I was just like, I'd kind of move around a lot. And I almost fell over so many different times. And it was just fun. It was like, it really felt like being on a roller coaster. It was just like, up and down and like push and pull, and
right.
It was really fun. So then I ended up in the band for 10 years after that. And then something really similar to a band like the X, and something like what I found really appealing about Neptune was it was like always evolutionary. There was always something new, and like, I new membership, and always like kind of like, just challenging themselves, like new ideas and whatnot, and that really appealed to me. So after I left the band, I went for like the new lineup. I flew out from Arizona. I was living in Arizona. I flew out to actually just see the show, because it kind of, it meant a lot to me to be there. And I know like a lot of people don't often, they like, people talk about band drama and all this stuff, but those guys are like, I love them like my brothers.
Right. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I understand what that can be like. I mean, it's nice to hear that you don't have any kind of like hard feelings or anything when because you're not part of the band anymore. When did they break up exactly?
Well,
they're not officially broken up.
No, like they never did, and
yeah.
The band will never cease to exist so long as Jason is around. And I never, in my mind, I never actually quit the band. I just sort of, we just released a new record, which we recorded in 2009. And we worked on slowly over the years, which is, it's my favorite record I've ever been a part of. I really love it. It's super brutal. And we were all in really rough spots in our lives. 2 of us were going through some really, heavy transitions, like breakups. And so I didn't, I needed to get out of Boston. I hated living in Boston after a while, and, it was too expensive. I couldn't afford it. Yeah. So I, the hardest thing about leaving, it wasn't even like, I love my siblings. I love my family. The hardest thing about that decision was leaving Neptune. And, because we're such good friends, they were awesome about it. They were like, of course, we think you need to do this. It's a good thing. And, so now we've kind of, we're again talking about, doing stuff remotely. The thing that's really changed about the band is Jason now lives in Colorado. Mark lives in North Carolina. Kevin is up in Boston. So I don't know if you know Kevin Micah. He's kind of always been sort of like a member of the band, even like, you know, predating my involvement in the band. He has a really awesome project called Animal Hospital, which is definitely worth checking out.
Okay.
So we keep talking about doing stuff, and before the pandemic actually hit, Kevin and I were getting together and doing dual drum practices to try to, like, you know, write some new Neptune material. So yeah, Neptune is like, it's, you know, it's a hard thing to kill. I think
yeah. Well, I guess with that ability to have a revolving door or like a kind of consistent cast of characters that you can kind of draw from, and there's no set members necessarily per se. Minus Jason, you were saying, that could probably leads to kind of an eternal life, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So you joined in about 2000. See, because like the history, the research that I was doing, I was just like, the history just seemed a little skewed. So I figured I might as well just kind of get it straight from you, and like maybe that'll kind of like straighten it out for me, help me understand it a little bit better. So it seems that according to the discography, you've performed on most every recording minus some of the early like singles and EPs and stuff. Does that sound right?
Not necessarily, no. I think I'm also, I kind of call myself a Neptune historian because it's, you know, it's not every day that you get to join a band that you're a fan of, you know. Like once I did join the band, I started making a website, and I started doing like, you know, a lot of archival stuff. Like I made a show archive and all of this stuff. So the thing is, like, yeah, I guess there was only there were 3 Neptune releases before I joined. So 2 7-inches and a CD. So in my 10 years of being in the band, I think we did 20 releases. I guess I played on most of the records.
But I was looking at some of the credits that you had done, and so you have done more than just the percussion. So you're kind of like a multi-instrumentalist. You've done like what, some melodica and some other kind of like weird percussion elements, stuff like that.
In Neptune, I started off playing percussion. Jason welded, but it was more, you know, after I left Neptune. I actually took a break from music for about 8 years. And started playing clarinet and guitar a lot. So, you know, now in the bands that I play, I do a lot more like, you know, guitar, clarinet, melodica. One of my good friends here, Alec Redfern, who was on the show before.
Yes.
We've been playing together, and
Say You Love Satan?
What's that?
Say You Love Satan, right?
Yeah, Say You Love Satan with our friend Hannah, who's doing vocal. But Alec and I are doing, we're actually recording in about a week and a half at Machines with Magnets. We're just going to go in and improv a bunch of stuff. But it's funny in the world of modular synthesis, like I'll ask Alec how to do stuff and he'll tell me, and I'm like, okay, I need definitions for almost every word you just said. I have no idea what you're talking.
Yeah, well, you need a schematic is what you need.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a huge learning curve, but it's a lot of fun. So
yeah, I can't stand that stuff. I mean, like I love those things, but I have a hard enough time with like just a regular keyboard and how many keys are in front of me. Like that's already plenty. You know,
right.
Like, and you start putting in all these like patch cords and cables and stuff. Like, you know, God knows how many knobs for how many different types of effects. Like, it's really daunting, I feel.
It is really daunting, and you know, for me, I've never had a music lesson in my life. So you know, I'm like, Alec, what note are you playing? And he'll be like, D, and I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Show me on the keyboard where it is. So when we were rehearsing, when we were writing the Say You Love Satan stuff, we'd like set up across from each other, and I was watching his fingers, you know, to like kind of play along, but like it was like the mirror effect. I'm like playing in the wrong direction that I should.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I have been learning a lot, but still, it's just like, I don't know. You need you need some sort of degree to figure that shit out. It's crazy.
Yeah, either that or just like an obsessive, like compulsive, like draw to it, where you're just playing with it every day for God knows how long, and just till you figure it out. Because that's what, like, because it's not just hitting one key. You can't just hit one key and expect, okay, that's the note. Because as soon as you like start affecting all of the other, like, you know, modulations, now that one note isn't just ding, it's like all this other weird stuff. And how do you like know how to manipulate it to repeat that exact same like frequency? And like, yeah, it's maddening. I don't know. I can't handle it.
It's awfully exciting, but it is maddening. You know,
I'm sure it is exciting, because like when you get it together and it starts, you know, coming together and working out, I'm sure it's just like anything else, you know. But yeah, the process in which to get there seems a little maddening.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So now, Say You Love Satan, that's going to be the first recording that you guys do?
I think so.
Because you haven't put anything out for Say You Love Satan yet.
We haven't yet. No, that band was sort of born, I guess, like out of the pandemic, really. And it's funny, you know, Alec and I had, you know, Neptune and, you know, both the Eyesores and Barnacled, which are, you know, Alec's bands. We'd played together a bunch over the years, and but we never really knew each other. And a really good friend of ours, mutual friend of ours, James Quigley, he would always tell me, he would be like, you know, oh, you would love my friend Alec. You guys would hit it off. So James actually stayed here a couple of years ago for, you know, he was here for the holidays, and he brought Alec over. And of course, Alec and I just like start talking about music and records, and like, and it was like instantly like, you know, like best buds.
Yeah.
So we had talked a bunch about, you know, playing together, and I really, this is going to sound really weird, but when Moog put out the Grandmother, which is the synthesizer that I bought, I was really, really attracted to the color pattern. Like, I thought the design of it was really cool, and I was like, I'm gonna get one. Maybe Alec can like show me how to, you know, how to use it. And from there, like, you know, he'd come over and we just like started doing stuff, and so we, you know, we have a friend named Hannah who she was in a band called Freak Bag. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they were
yeah.
awesome. So Hannah was doing vocals, and, you know, it was weird, like being in the pandemic, you know, all of us were pretty sheltered and like not really leaving our house. So we're like, you know, we could get together in the garage and, you know, work some stuff out. So Alec and I, we spent a lot of time, like, you know, fleshing out music, and we're both sort of, I don't know, we love just like, you know, jamming, being like old goofballs, you know. So we were able to like write a couple songs, and our friend Dan Shea, who does this thing out of Boston called Boston Hassle, invited us to do a live stream, which was really awesome, because that sort of was a good catalyst for us to actually flesh stuff out and get stuff together. You know, but the thing that was, you know, I think the live stream was in September, and we were rehearsing in my garage, and then, you know, the garage isn't heated, so you know, winter was just like, we're like, no, I'm not going to freeze my ass off. So we've kind of you know, it's kind of been on hold for a little bit, but Alec and I, when we do record, we're gonna do the basic tracks of Say You Love Satan. And then we're starting a new band, which we have a name, but we don't have any music. So our name is Liminal Light. So I think what we're going to do, we're just going to go and do a bunch of improv stuff, and then like weave it together and maybe make like an EP or a record out of it. So kind of like doing double band duty.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, you like to keep busy, it seems. I mean, obviously between all the projects and the label that you run, and obviously that probably keeps you pretty busy too.
It really does. And the label kind of saved me in the pandemic in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
You know, anything musical I love, like talking about music. You know, so the label's been great because I can do a lot of stuff like, you know, I love doing graphic design. I love interacting with people. So I think in 2020 I had plans to do 4 or 5 releases, and it ended up being 17.
Oof.
It,
Wow.
yeah, it was awesome. Um, so you know, it's really fun. Like in a lot of ways, doing the label's really fun because you know you're like, well, I could put out these records and make art and like not really have to do anything. Like I don't have to do music. So, but yeah, it's good. It was a good way to keep me connected with a lot of friends. And you know, it's definitely, it's great because, you know, like I kind of draw inspiration from everything, from everywhere. And, you know, seeing like different friends doing stuff, I'm like, this is awesome. Let's make a record. Let's, you know, let's put something out. So, so yeah, it really snowballed last year and even the previous year. So yeah, it was definitely good for my mental health during lockdown.
That's great. So I have to ask because I mean, you know, you're talking on a show right now called Vinyl and Vision, and I supposedly emphasize on vinyl, which I haven't been doing because of the pandemic. Because with these you know virtual calls instead of being in person here, I've lost the vinyl element where we'd bring in a record and actually play it and show it off. But your label deals primarily with cassettes. Yes.
And I mean, there's a couple reasons for that. You know, I love vinyl. I'm a vinyl purist, but vinyl production it's really costly. It's not something like, I mean, I couldn't put out 17 pieces of vinyl in a year.
Right. And it's timely too.
Yeah. And the reason the label started was in 2005 when Neptune became a 3-piece. We just really started experimenting and recording stuff, and all 3 of us started different labels. So mine at the time was called Wrong Whole, which is, you know, a bit crass.
Is that based on a band that you had been part of?
It actually is. It's a weird story. It is a bit crass. It's weird. So I changed it to the Wrong, WHOLE. So that's how Wrong Whole Archival Bureau came to be. I just, you know, when Neptune was doing cassettes, I just needed a name, and I kind of threw that one out, and it stuck. And you know, that's where that came from. But to kind of get back to the cassettes, you know, I myself is like, you know, a music lover and like a huge music consumer. I always love the physical product, you know?
Right.
So cassettes are, you know, they're not that expensive to manufacture. You can make them look awesome. They come with a digital download. So, you know, for people who love physical format, you know, you still can have something tangible. You know, and then, I mean, a lot of like, sadly, I don't get a ton of time to like sit in my living room and listen to records. You know, a lot of times I listen to music, like if I'm working or, you know, like even if I'm in my garage, like doing art stuff, like I listen to it on my little Bluetooth speaker or whatever it is.
Right.
So, you know, that's kind of why I focus mainly on cassettes. It's more, you know, because really vinyl is cost prohibitive. But I don't know. I kind of love doing cassettes. I think they're pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely unique. It's definitely kind of like a niche market, I think. I mean, and you're absolutely correct. I mean, vinyl is expensive. It's expensive and it's time consuming to do. Like, you have to have a lot of like prep time ahead of time to like, you know, like just account for it correctly. Like, you know, shipping wise, like, you know, if you're doing pre-sales, you just know when it's coming in, and like it can be anywhere from 2 to 4 to 5 months depending on where you're going, I guess. So yeah, no, I hear you, man. I mean, it's fine. But so quality wise, how do you feel about the difference between the cassette and vinyl?
I mean, nothing sounds as good as vinyl.
Yeah.
I work with a duplication company called Cryptic Carousel, and I believe they're in upstate New York. So their duplication is great. Like the sound is really good. I mean, you obviously get tape hiss, which, is, I guess, sort of akin to vinyl pop.
Yeah, vinyl crackle.
Yeah, but I'm really happy, and every artist whose record I put out, once they listen to the actual set, are really happy with it. And I was surprised. I did a I'm not going to name who it was, but I did a record for a friend who is extremely picky about stuff, which I understand. I am too. Mm-hmm. But the cassette came back and they were like, wow, I can't believe it sounds this good. And I was like, oh, cool. That's great. That's good to hear, Yeah. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I really wish I could do more vinyl. And when Neptune, we've been talking a lot over the past year about the record we just released, which is called Mother of Millions. Right. And we were going to do it on vinyl. We were going to do double vinyl. And I think the base cost of just pressing the records was somewhere around $4,000. And then, I mean, because we all love artwork and inserts, and it would have ended up being so much money. We were going to do it, but then the pandemic happened, and we were like, well, even if we could play shows to promote this record, it's still, it's going to be a long time before we could actually get out there and do anything. So we ended up just doing cassette. Maybe someday it'll come out on vinyl. I love that, but
yeah. I mean, it's kind of out of necessity, I mean, I'm glad that you did it. Obviously it took long enough for you guys to manufacture in the first place. I mean, you said you recorded it in 2009, right?
Yeah, that was, overall, it's really weird. This is one of my favorite records I've ever done or been a part of. And like I said earlier, it was born out of a time that we were all fucked up, not drugs or anything. We were just
emotionally
all emotional messes,
Yeah.
And we made this record and we wrote it, and when we wrote this record, we completely changed all of our setups, so it would force us to play differently, which is kind of what we would do for every record anyways. So we recorded it in 2009 with Kevin Micah, and I think we did, initially it was a 2-day session, and we wanted the record to sound brutal. The music was just brutal. There were there's one song where Mark Pearson, who was playing baritone guitar and synthesizer and whatever on the record, there's one song where he was like, I dare anyone to try to find a single note in this song. So because of that, Mark had an idea that he wanted all the room mics to be run through tube amps, which we did. And it really it was really just the most blown out, crazy sounding shit. And then about, I think 6 months after we recorded the record, I moved to Arizona for 2 years. And then my husband and I moved back. We came back to Rhode Island. And so I went up and I started, I think in, 2012, went up and did some percussion overdubs and some vocals. And then 2013 did some more. And then, we sat on it for a while, and then both Jason and Mark came to Providence, and we spent 2 days at Machines with Magnets. and mixed it. And, our friend Seth Manchester, who's, the kind of like the head engineer over there, was kind of awesome because, we're always like, no, we want it to sound that way. We want it to sound that shitty. But he really like doctored the sound. He's so good at what he does. That before any of us were done saying like what we wanted, it was sounding that way. So so that was a really big like that was great doing that. I think we also did some like like vocal overdubs and whatnot. And then during like pretty much the entire pandemic year, we have a good friend named Scott Craggs, who is a mastering engineer, and he runs this place called Old Colony Mastering. And he was based out of Boston, but he moved to North Scituate, Rhode Island, and bought a property that had a standalone building, which he made into a mastering studio.
Nice.
So I think last year we did 6 or 7 mastering passes where we were just asking Scott, do the weirdest shit you can think of, or like, we want to do this, can you try this? And we actually like tried so much stuff. We did the same thing, like Seth, actually, when we mixed it, the last song is this like 9.5 minute krautrock song. And we asked Seth, we were like, can you like dub it out? Just do so. And he like, the stuff that he did on it is amazing. So it's cool that like, as like the nucleus of the band, the 3-piece, we made this record, but we had a lot of input from other people to like really sculpt the sound. And a lot of the reason why I feel like it's my favorite record I ever been a part of is, being a musician playing in bands that, most people don't like, or like, it's not very like marketable music. Right. We're always like the biggest hindrance is money. So we would go into a studio and maybe track for a day and then mix for like 2 days or something. So this one, we actually took our time, 11 and a half years to make it sound as like fucked up as it does. Right. So overall it was a great experience. And, yeah, I'm really, really happy with the way that came out.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm going to have to listen back to it now that you've kind of like informed me a little bit more of the background and kind of what went into the like the mixing and the mastering of it, especially. So yeah. I'm going to listen to it with like some fresh ears now. Yeah, you guys get a lot of crazy sounds. I mean, like I've been listening to a number of the records over the past few weeks. And yeah, a lot of the times I can't even tell what instrument is what. I mean, I guess obviously this might have a lot to do with the fact that that you guys use like handmade instruments. So, yeah. Even the guitars, what are I imagine to be guitars, I was like, okay, well, these sound a little different. Like the percussion sounds a little different. I mean, they have similarities to obviously like your generic run-of-the-mill like basses and guitars and stuff. But definitely, kept me on my toes as far as just like, what am I hearing exactly? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I like hearing that. That makes me happy. Yeah, when we became a 3-piece, actually, no, I guess maybe slightly before, Jason and Mark both got really into electronics and building electronics. And so Jason made what we called an oscillator organ. It had wooden keys. I think it had maybe like between like 9 and 11 wooden keys, and it would trigger different, oscillator tones. And then Mark made this really awesome, I don't even know what you would call it, but it was all light switches. So like, like light switches that you would get at Home Depot or whatever. And he just like, made this synth out of like, light switches. It was awesome. Wow. So yeah, like that was always fun. I really love, experimenting with different sounds, and it got really exciting for me because I mean, I started playing drums when I was 3 years old.
3
when I was 3 years old. Yeah. I lucked out because I have a bunch of, I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and, I was born in 1974. And my 2 older sisters are 13 and 14 years older than me. My sister, like, just decided one year at Christmas to get me a drum set, like one of those little kiddie drum sets.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just after I turned 3, because my birthday is December. And ever since then, I never let go of it.
You started touching on stuff that I was going to ask you about anyway. Like,
Yeah.
your parents didn't really have much of an influence on you, right?
No, they did actually.
Okay.
My whole family is somewhat artistic. My dad was really into, I wasn't very close with my dad. He was kind of a prick. But he was really into classical music. But he loved shitty classical music. Like he loved like Ravel's Bolero and, but some really cool stuff. And as a kid, I hated it. My brother and I like just hated it. And so one day we noticed that he had a Simon and Garfunkel cassette, and we were like, "Oh God, can we please not listen to Bolero and play this cassette?" And like Simon and Garfunkel, I was like, "Oh, this is so much cooler. Like I like this, you know." And my mom was a big music fan. Her favorite band was the Platters. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They were like 50s vocal band. They're great. I still love that band. I can't listen to them anymore because since my mom passed away, as soon as I hear them, I just start crying. But both of my parents were definitely musical people. I have 3 sisters, but they're all artists. They're all like painters, sculptors, whatever. So I, for some reason, got the music bug. I don't know how. I think it might have been on Solid Gold or something. There was a performance. Blondie was doing a performance. And I remember remember the performance because it was a black backdrop. They were all wearing black. And every time they would focus on Chris Stein, the drummer, I just remember thinking like, that is what I want to do. I want to be that guy. Like I want to be in this situation.
Yeah.
So that was probably like my most formative musical memory.
Yeah. Oh, weird. But you were already playing drums at this point, weren't you? I mean, because you were playing since you were 3.
I was, but I mean, you know, I got my first drum kit when I was 3. I was really interested in music, but you know, at 3 years old, I wasn't studying like, oh, I'm going to learn this or like learn this. Right. You know, I never really took it serious. It was something that I always thought was really cool and I always wanted to do, but I never took it, you know, seriously until I discovered pot and was able to buy my first drum kit. So, but it, you know, music was always a really big part of my life. And, you know, I know a lot of people like say this and I don't want to sound cliche, but, you know, a lot of my young life was kind of traumatic. Like I said, my dad was sort of a prick and, music was just a great escape. And my sisters had a turntable and records, and I would just go and sit in their room and listen to records endlessly, you know, and that was my, you know, that sort of, that was like my savior of, you know, my young life. So I know a lot of people have had, like, I've talked to a lot of people and they've had the same, you know, experience that like something like, you know, music or art or whatever kind of, you know, really set them on a path that kind of, you know, saved their life in some sort of way. So,
right. Yeah, well, it seems like, so you were saying about watching that Blondie performance. I mean, that might have been the trigger that kind of put it in your mind that you were like, oh, you can actually do music as like a living. It's not just something you just do for fun. It's like, I could actually do that and that could be what I do.
Yeah.
You know, that sounds interesting because obviously you already had the bug that you thought it was cool.
Yeah. And as a kid, I remember I used to tell people, they were like, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, a rock star. And my mom and my sisters thought that was hilarious. And kind of funny because, you know, in my later life or even in my early teens, really started to abhor the idea of rock stars and rock stardom. But as a kid, I was like, yes, I want to be Chris Stein. I want to like play drums and look really cool. And, you know, like obviously like as a young gay kid, seeing something like, you know, as androgynous as Prince, you know, I was like, oh, you know, not like it's sort of like blurred lines a little bit. I'm like, not everybody has to be like, this like,
Model-esque.
or like, yeah. So
Yeah.
that was kind of huge. So
Yeah. I think it was his attitude more than anything that like commanded his like sexuality.
right.
It was just like that boisterous, like kind of no fucks given, like
Right.
attitude that he could just stand in. Like he wouldn't even have to do anything. He just has this that stature of just being like, I'm hot as fuck and I know it, and that just makes you that much more desirable.
There's a video. One of my favorite Prince songs is "I Want to Be Your Lover." Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's on his second record, and he does an early video where he is wearing a U-scoop, like leopard print, I don't know, whatever, like tank top, I guess. And he has these giant hoop earrings and this feathered hair. And I was just like, how does that guy make that look so fucking cool? Like, that guy is just the epitome of cool.
Yeah, I know. So I was going to start to ask you about the record that you chose for tonight. So we were able to narrow it down together, which was fun. You obviously have so many influences. I understand that it's hard to do. So and I'm happy to kind of try to narrow it down and try to figure that out together. And so ultimately you chose the Ex+Tom Cora's "Scrabbling at the Lock."
Scrabbling at the Lock, yes.
Yeah.
It was. I do have to say that. Well, I do want to say thank you for having me on, because this is great. I love this. I love your program, and
Sure, man. Thank you for doing it.
yeah, of course. And it's always fun to, talk about music. But I have to say that trying to pick a favorite record was one of the hardest things I've done in a long time. So I thought, like, you and I had like kind of like discussed a few things like through text, and then one of my best friends, Mark, who is a member of Neptune, he and we have a lot of similar music tastes. And so I actually texted him and I'm like, Mark,
what record would you choose?
I was like, what's my favorite record? And he was like, how did you not choose Ministry? And because both like loved, like Ministry. And then after you and I talked, like, I was just like really thinking of all of the records that sort of, like caused a very like a big left turn in my life. And so I ended up choosing the Ex+Tom Cora's "Scrabbling at the Lock" because that is, in my opinion, it's one of the best records ever made. But that really was a huge turning point, not only musically, but in terms of like, like so many different things. I love their DIY aesthetic. They also, like, I mean, they're a Dutch band, and they were also, at the time that I discovered them, I didn't care about politics, and they're very political. And I started learning more about American politics through a band from the Netherlands, and I did, like, growing up in the United States. So yeah.
I see. So what was your first experience like with, I'm going to say with the X, because I assume that you were introduced to the X before you found this album, or maybe even before it came out.
Right. I can pinpoint the exact moment where I heard about the X, and I was on a swing set in a park up from like a block up from my mom's old house. And somebody I mentioned earlier is my good friend David Waterhouse, and he was just saying that, like, you got to check out this band, the X. And so the first record I actually heard of theirs was called Joggers and Smoggers, which came out. It was the record that came out before Scrabbling at the Lock. And when I heard it, I was, like, I really loved industrial music. I loved, Ministry and Front 242, and I was always looking for sort of the most abrasive and, I guess maybe not necessarily discordant. But I guess maybe like stuff that was really like gnarly and harsh. And I heard the X, and Joggers and Smoggers is, it's a double record. I think there's like 34 or 35 songs on it. They had all these guests, and to me, it was a complete revelation because it was so crazy sounding to me, but it wasn't all distorted guitars. It was,
Right.
it was truly weird. It was the weirdest stuff I'd heard at the time.
And you're how old at this time? 15?
I'm
trying to do the math in my head. So, because that came out in 89, I think, and so...
I met David in 1993. So
okay.
Because we were in a band with his girlfriend at the time before we started Little Sexer, and that was 93, maybe early 94. So Scrabbling at the Lock actually came out in 1993.
No,
but
91.
No. Yeah. That came out in 91. The other one they did with Tom Cora came out in 1993.
Yes.
So, but I don't think I heard Scrabbling at the Lock
Until later.
Yeah, until like a little bit later.
Okay.
But they every record sounded like the X, but every record was also somewhat of a major shift and a major turn.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite records of theirs is this record called Oral Gorilla.
Mm-hmm.
It's, that record is, they had this woman, Nicolette, playing guitar, and it is one of the noisiest records they did.
I've listened to it.
Yeah.
When you suggested, I was just like, well, let me listen to the X. So I listened to actually that one, Joggers and Smoggers, and History is What's Happening.
Oh, yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, I did exactly what you probably did. I kind of was just like, okay, well, here's the band, here's the check, like the here's the point that I'm starting in. Let me go back. Let me hear like where they came from, like what they started out as, and just kind of hear the progression, kind of get a feel for what they were doing and what they sounded like before joining up with Tom Cora and recording these two other records.
Yeah, and so when I finally got Scrabbling at the Lock, I mean the first song on it, State of Shock, is it starts off with this really rhythmic, these two like rhythmic guitar parts, and the cello comes in, and then it just like goes into this part where they just like start ripping. And I remember when I heard that for the first time, I was just like, holy shit, this is what I hope I can achieve someday, like doing music. Like, this is incredible. It was cool to me at the time to like, to have like non-traditional instruments in like some sort of like more traditional rock settings.
Right.
You got this like scrapey, very like propulsive percussive band, and then Tom Cora playing cello, which added this insane sort of like melody to the band. The other reason that Scrabbling at the Lock was huge to me is because Andy Moore, who was the guitarist of Dog-Faced Hermans, that was the first record he did with the X.
Yes, right.
He like a permanent member. So he also brought like a different sort of melodicism to the band. But Scrabbling at the Lock was, it really changed everything about how I thought about music. From my discovery of the X, it was sort of like, a tree blooming. Like I just started to listen and find out like all these other bands because of it. In the 90s, I didn't really have a turntable. I bought this. This is the original copy of Scrabbling at the Lock, which
on CD.
I got in like 93, 94. It was probably 94.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like I've just been I've been a crazy collector of their stuff, ever since.
Yeah. Well, so I asked you. You were helping me out a lot with this because I was telling you how this seems to be a very enigmatic record and band. I mean, at this record specifically. I mean, the X. Okay, you can kind of learn a lot about them, but this record kind of has like gone kind of gone under the radar, I think, as far as their catalog is concerned. Like, they're just like I couldn't even find lyrics. Like, if you like, because I listen to everything digitally on through iTunes Music, and usually every major release will have the option to just kind of like hit the lyrics with it. So as you're playing the music, you can just kind of read along with the words, and those aren't on there.
Yeah,
it's not on Bandcamp. The only thing I could think of was just like, okay, well, maybe a pressing of the record, like maybe an actual copy of the record has the lyrics with it, because it's not on their website. Like, there's no, like, the singer, GW Sock? Is that how you pronounce his name?
GW Sock.
GW Sock.
His name is actually Yost Clay.
Right.
But that's the other thing is, like, he's an incredible lyricist. And when you said that, you were like, I'm having a hard time finding lyrics. So I did the same thing. I did a search, and I found there were only 3 songs from Scrabbling at the Lock that I could find lyrics
for.
But upon reading them, they were incorrect.
Oh, yeah.
So what I sent to you, I made some corrections on, and then I just took pictures of the record. Of the
sleeve, right.
Yeah. Records reissued Scrabbling at the Lock about like maybe 6 or 7 years ago or something.
Yeah, so, I see that you got the copy from 2009.
Oh, okay. So
because it says it was remastered by Colin and Andy at OT 301 in January 2009.
Right.
So I'm assuming it was reissued somewhere around that time.
Yeah.
I just gotta see this real fast. What is up with them? Recording with Chumbawamba.
So, admittedly, I've never been a fan of Chumbawamba. They were one of the bands that I checked out. But their earlier stuff is wildly different from what...
than Tub Thumping.
Yeah, Tub Thumping. Oh, God. That song makes me cringe.
I know. And it probably makes them cringe, too. It's one of those weird things where, like, you don't think about it. Like, you get the mainstream hit. You hear this song all over the radio. It's it's just being bashed into your head from all angles, and you're like, who the fuck is that band? I hate that band.
Right.
And then you're like, if you want to take the time, you can actually research them and be like, oh, they were actually a band long before this song ever came out.
Yeah.
And doing something completely different than this, this weird mainstream bullshit music.
Right. So when I discovered the X, it was, it was like the dawn of the internet, but it was really before I could go on and plug in like the X. What can I find out about them? Right. But they were really great. One thing that was really like huge to me was they had a mail order you could get stuff from, and they would, they would always they would distro other bands. So Chumbawamba was one of them, and I was like, I'm going to check them out. So I ordered a Chumbawamba CD, and I don't know what happened to it. I didn't listen to it twice, but it was more like folk music, But one thing about the X particularly that was really great to me was, one of the first times I had sent them like a check for a bunch of CDs, I got a letter back from Yost, from the lead singer of the X. And to me, it was like huge. I was like, holy shit, no way. And I still have it somewhere. It's like somewhere in a box. But, the thing that another thing I really loved about them was like the human element. They were like, they were approachable, and they all seemed so incredibly smart and, talented and whatnot. So, but yeah, it is funny that that Chumbawamba ended up becoming like this international pop band.
Right. But only for one song. There's just a one-hit wonder.
Only for one song. They did make another record after that, another pop record after that, but it didn't. It kind of went nowhere.
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into this record, because you've already mentioned a little bit about how your initial experience listening to State of Shock was like. So let's go ahead and play a little bit of that.
Yeah, that song, I remember listening to it. I love the way the guitars are recorded.
Mm-hmm.
They sound really great. And again, like, so from all the stuff that I had heard from the X previously, there was like a lot of their stuff is very rhythmic. And there's melody, of course, but like the melody that Tom Cora brought, like those cello lines are so cool. And Andy also, like, they do some cool interplay throughout the record. But that song, I remember the first time listening to it, and it's like, dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun. But when it really kicks in, I was just like, fuck, this is amazing. And that's from end to end is just incredible. And so Kat from the X, Katharina Bornfield, who also goes by the name Katrin sometimes, she was a massive influence on me on my drumming. I cannot I can't claim that I can play as well as her, but she really, like, I loved her, like, she didn't always do like, hi-hat 4/4 beats. She was like, she definitely did like a lot of like African sort of inspired rolling percussion and wood blocks and all of this stuff. And like, I really love, I love that that song State of Shock. I just love the, it's super simple, but throughout that track, there's just like, there's so much that happens. And the lyrics, I love the lyrics. Yosa's lyrics are amazing on that track.
Yeah. There's a couple of things about this song that I have to mention. First of all, I was listening to this again today, and I was realizing that there's a lot of music on this album.
Yeah.
Like, I think this album is about, it's just shy of an hour in playtime. Yep. But there is so much music and there's so few words, because like even the intro that we listened to about, a little more than 30 seconds worth of the intro from the beginning into that part where the guitars really kind of come in and like it just starts really getting intense, and none of the words came in yet.
Right.
So, but from what I do gather of the lyrics, it just seems that this song in particular, I love his play of words, especially by the last verse. It's kind of like just throwing in all of these, little phrases of lines that he already kind of mentioned throughout the first two verses.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of jumbled together and just like this kind of like very loose, wordplay and kind of like, what do they call that? That's like a train of thought kind of thing.
Right.
Sounds to me like it just basically, the lyrics basically summed up, I think, as like an infinite loop of like chaos and dread.
Yeah.
Does that sound like right to you?
That does sound right. But that was another thing. Like that was another thing that I really found inspirational about X was, I think one of the first times I had seen them, I went up to their bass player at the time, this guy named Luke, and I was like, oh my God, you guys were amazing. You blew my mind. And he was really cool. Just like so thankful and like, awesome. It's great that, you're here and whatnot. And then, we got to play with the X a couple of times, and they're just like so human. And they're awesome with like interacting with, because they they have a lot of people that are fanatically in love with that band, and they're just so real, like just real people who are like, oh, thank you, that's great, love it, come back to our next show or whatever. So so that was that like just seeing the human element of them was really kind of inspirational to me.
Yeah, that's always nice to know that fame or stature or whatever it is that like that doesn't go to people's heads that have been doing this. I mean, they've been doing this a long time, so I mean, but that's the thing too. It's just like, so they've never, you looking at Blondie back when you were a kid, and then like seeing that rock and roll person on TV and being like, oh my God, I want to do that, as you got older and you got into more like progressive music, more, you know, experimental music, and then you find a band like the X, who have never been a mainstream band, never really kind of experienced any like major success. I mean, like they're definitely like doing well for themselves, I'm sure.
Right.
But that's just the thing, is it's like they've managed to earn themselves a living doing what they love and being true to themselves and doing exactly what they want,
Right.
without compromise.
Right.
And that's an admirable quality as well for a band. It's just like, you don't have to be a superstar or sell out or be fucking Chumbawamba now in
Right.
order to be able to live off of doing what you love. Like, and this band seems to be an example of that.
Definitely. I learned a lot from that. I really learned a lot. And, at 46 years old, I'm never going to stop playing music. I have no desire to ever play in a pop band or, be in a wedding cover band, because that would be worse than like working, like the most awful job ever. But it's like really inspirational to me that those guys are musical lifers. I shouldn't say guys, those people.
Those people, yeah.
Trend. And they, it's like it's really amazing to see people that get so much out of, composing and performing and interacting with their audience. I think those guys are gonna play until they're, dead.
Yeah.
An interesting story that I read about Tom Cora. So Tom Cora was an American cellist. And he ended up, like, he was living in France because he married that woman. I cannot pronounce her last name. It's Catherine
Jeannot? Yeah, because you don't pronounce the X. It's French, it seems, right?
It is French, yeah, because he was living in France at the time of his death. He died.
Jaunet?
Jaunieux?
Jauniaux to the people listening.
But Tom Cora, I think he passed away at like 42, maybe even like 44. He died of cancer. But 8 days before he died, he was on stage. He was playing a concert.
Oh, wow!
I was just like, man, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Did he know he had cancer? He knew he had it.
Yeah.
It wasn't just one of those things that was just undiagnosed and he just kind of...
No. He had been sick for a while.
Okay.
I think it was like 3 years or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, like he, music meant that much to him that, on his deathbed, he gets up and goes and plays a concert. And, that should inspire anybody, even if you don't like music,
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. Yeah. So listen, we should move on to the next song, and I don't know if you know how to pronounce it better than I do.
I do. It's called Igaden Fuli Nakazelek.
Beautiful. You off there. What were you going to say?
That song's kind of interesting. Well, it's very interesting actually to me. That's the second recording the X have done of that song. It was done by a band called Musicat. So Katrin, the drummer, also, she has a beautiful singing voice. So they recorded that. They did a single series also in 1991, the same year that Scrabbling at the Lock was released, and they did a version without cello, and it's like it's still like just as beautiful.
Oh yeah, okay. I feel like the cello really makes this song.
It does, but this actually this kind of sparked a interest in, Eastern European folk music. And I had really, like, one of the most memorable experiences of my life is I was probably 21, 22, and I was living in my first ever apartment, and I was booking bands at this drag bar in Boston called Jacques Cabaret.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved this band called Rhythm Activism. I saw them play with the Dog-Faced Hermans. And Wilf Plum, who was the drummer of the Dog-Faced Hermans, was drumming with Rhythm Activism. So they come and play this like crazy, drag bar, and they stayed at my house. And it was also amazing. Like, I'm 21 years old and I'm sitting at my kitchen table with Wilf Plum, who is also an incredible drummer. Guys, and we just started talking about Rhythm Activism did a song called Broom Dance, that's a traditional Hungarian folk song. And so I was just talking about it, and so he brought up Higa den Fuanakazelek, and was like, you have to check out this band Musicash. And they were a current band at the time, and they did a lot of their own compositions, but they did a lot of traditional Hungarian folk music, and that really sort of changed my life. Like, I got into a bunch of weird folk music, so that song, that was also a big left turn when I heard it. I was like, what are the origins? Like, why are they doing this song?
Yeah.
So weird for them. But again, it was very educational to me. It was
right.
It was great. So
yeah, I mean, this album is very much a turning point for them in their music career. So let's see, Scrabbling at the Lock is kind of quoted as being this album, they kind of peak at that, where they're kind of experimenting with sound and the genres of music. And Scrabbling is their best-selling record in history so far, in their history.
I did not know that.
That was actually off their website, which you told me to look at. So yeah.
Their best-selling record. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously not a massive seller either, but it's the best-selling one for them, and with good reason. I mean, it's definitely with these different notes of genres kind of blended into it. It obviously kind of like is a little bit more accessible to other people rather than just like punk rock kids,
Right.
So now this song, loose interpretation of the lyrics is "Cold winds are blowing," and based on the lyrics that you sent to me, one of them that sticks out to me is my hands and legs are under lock and key.
Right.
So it seems to me like this song is very much like kind of describing a lot of what's the word for that? It's more of like, I don't know, an acknowledgement of destitution.
Yeah,
is that the right way to say that?
It's just about like maybe.
Yeah, and restrictions. It's like being enslaved almost. So this past year excluded. When have you felt your most restricted?
When have I felt my most? That is a really good question.
I had to limit you from this year because this year was a giveaway.
That was a giveaway. I lucked out as a kid because my mom was always just like, if you want to do music, if you want to do whatever you want to do, you have to do what makes you happy. In that respect, I don't like, I didn't have a lot of restrictions. My mom was amazing. She, never hindered me from, she wasn't excited about my intake of marijuana when I was a kid, but never necessarily was like, you can't do that.
That's cool.
I don't know. I guess maybe as a young man, as a young gay man growing up in in Massachusetts, in like right in all the cities of Boston, like I felt very restricted because everyone's so homophobic and like so weird, and like that I think probably was when I felt the most restricted. Like I felt I couldn't be myself for a very long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that counts as restriction.
That makes sense. I mean, like, I think that's something I did not keep into consideration. I mean, I know that you're a gay man, but I didn't think about that because, I mean, that seems most probable. I actually spoke with Brandon Paris Sanchez recently.
I love Brandon.
Yeah, everyone does. He's such a great guy. And like he's another one of those people that like we were even spoke about it, how it's just like he doesn't have any androgyny, like he's passes as a straight man,
Right.
So he's had very few circumstances where he has to deal with any kind of persecution or anything like that, But obviously you still have to deal with it, because if you want to be out and show affection to the person that you love, then
right.
That's what you have to deal with, I guess.
I had a lot of that throughout my life, and still to this day, people are like, I never thought you were gay. And in my own mind, I feel like anytime I speak, like glitter just like flies out of me. Like I just like weird. Yeah. And so I was working for a law firm, and I like this guy started as an attorney, and he was a younger guy, and we became friends. He was really he's just a really funny guy, and I have a really like fucked up sense of humor, and so we would always just like joke about dumb shit, like doing crystal meth at work, and just stupid stuff that like doesn't really happen. So we had worked together for about I think 6 months until the company Christmas party. And I showed up and I was like, "Hey, Josh, this is my husband." And he was like, "Oh, dude, you're fucking hilarious." And I was like, "No, seriously, this is my husband." And he was like, "Oh." And still, if I talk to him, he's like, "I feel so bad about that." And I was like, "You shouldn't. That was one of the best things that ever happened." But I was like, to me, like in my own mind, I'm just like a screaming ninny, like ah! And
right.
So I do like, I have gotten that a lot over the years. I mean, it might be like because I grew up in Chelsea, Massachusetts, and you had no choice other than to, it was like, get your ass kicked or,
assimilate.
Yeah. So
right.
that's kind of what happened.
Yeah.
But
so were you ever a sports kid? Like when you were growing up, like did you kind of partake in that stuff?
Yeah. I love hockey, and hockey is the only sport I ever played. So I played hockey as a kid, played hockey in high school. And
that's like the toughest sport there is.
Cool. I love hockey. My husband actually, well, before the pandemic, we were been ticket holders to the Bruins, which are really, it's like really fun. So the first game of, I guess it would be 2 seasons ago now, we took a bunch of mushrooms and went to see the B Bruins, and it was the weirdest experience of all time. But I love hockey. I love the pacing of it. Hockey, I just think is like, it moves quicker.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of any sports, actually. I don't watch anything.
Yeah, sports are dumb.
I just don't care for them. I mean, I like to go and see them. Like, so when I was in a band, like, and did some touring, I was with, in a band with sports fans, like baseball fans particularly. And so every day off we would have, like, on tour, they would be like, "Is there a game going on? Is there a game going on? What stadium can we go to?" So I've been to all of these stadiums. I've seen all these baseball games, like, across the country, and I'm just like, this is fine. I mean, I get to drink beer and sit here and hang out with these guys and watch the game. That's cool. I can do that. But like watching it on TV is a different thing, and I just don't like watching sports.
When I was a kid, my dad would give my brother and I $20. We'd take the bus into Boston, go to Fenway Park. We'd get bleacher seats, hot dogs, and that actually, my first live experience was at a Red Sox game. And I I remember like walking up the ramp and seeing the lights and hearing the sound, like just like of all the people, the cheering, and it was so exciting. It was such a cool thing.
Right.
And it wasn't, I wasn't necessarily psyched that I was going to see baseball. I was like, something is happening. It's like this magnetic, electric sort of vibe in the air, and that was really.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's true of almost any live event. That's like, I think the drawing factor of doing anything with a group of people, which is what's been so detrimental to us this past year, is that none of us have experienced that again. Like, we almost forget what it's like, right?
Yeah, weird. It's been a weird year.
Fuck, sure has. All right, so we should move on though. Let's move on to the song King Kami. Hold on, I'm just going to buffer a little bit. I want to get to the words.
There it is.
That took a while.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, they definitely have a lot of, like, there's a lot of lead time on their songs.
Yeah.
But that one in particular, it's amazing because you have this really trebly, tinny guitar, and the bass, like, so this guy, Luke Clausen, was his name. He was in the band for, I believe, 19 years. And he and Katrin, like, the way they played together, they were such an awesome rhythm section. So the thing I really liked about, or I really like about this song and any of these songs, is they let each other sort of breathe. You'll hear like guitar and something else will come in, then the vocals come in, and then they'll also be reductive in the way that they compose their music, and they give everybody space. That's really cool. And this song in particular, so Catherine Janiu, how did we
Jaunet? I don't know. Maybe.
So this in a way was like a first for the X, where Yos and Catherine do some vocal trade-offs, which I think is really cool. And all of these, from what I know, all of the vocalizations that Catherine does on this record were all improvisational. And she was the wife of Tom Cora.
Okay.
So this one's really cool because I do like the call and response that they sort of do here.
Like in that chorus part, right?
Yeah, and a lot of what she does is, I think she's just actually like phonetically making sounds. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, no.
Oh, thank you. I was actually going to ask you this, so you're going right into it.
Yeah, I think like her instrument was just weird vocalization, like vocal improv. Right.
But it's not like Dutch or Hungarian. It's not some different language.
I don't think it's Dutch. I know. Well, she was French. That's why Tom Cora ended up moving to France, because they got married. But yeah, I don't. I mean, sometimes it sounds like she's actually singing words, but I've never been able to make it out. And, I've been listening to this record for probably, close to 30 years.
Right, but you don't speak any languages, or do you?
I don't. I don't speak any other language. Okay,
because I mean, like with the second song, I mean, having listened to it without you giving me any information about it, and not having been able to read, the liner notes at all, I knew it was in a different language, or I assumed it was a different language, but I didn't know what it was exactly. Right. So this song, kind of the same thing, is like listening to it without any kind of frame of reference. I'm like, okay, she's singing in some weird language. I don't even know if it's like possibly in Arabic or God knows what, you know, because like being the international type of band that they are, and like having these influences and having some of this like kind of European kind of traditional folky feel in the music now. And for me as an outsider listening to this for the first time, because I've never heard this right before you mentioned it, that's kind of like the way I was kind of taking it. I was just like, she must be singing in a different language, you know, like the previous song, I can't pronounce it. Exactly. What you said. I was just assuming it was more of that, you know, more of like this other language, which it turned out to be Hungarian, you know.
Right. I mean, the only reason I know how to pronounce it is just because I've listened to the song probably like, you know, thousands of times over.
Right. You're just saying it phonetically now.
Yeah. So I mean, like what she does doesn't necessarily sound like the French language to me. And the other thing is, you know, the X have always printed their lyrics in the artwork of their records. There is nothing of what she does printed on the record.
So it leads you to believe it's interpretation and just kind of like some noise.
Yeah, and
it's kind of like what's her name from the B-52s and Rock Lobster, right?
Oh, Kate Pearson or
yeah. I can't remember which one it is. Which one of the ladies it is?
I think it's Kate Pearson. Yeah.
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 She's got that weird shrilly kind of like high shrieking thing. Yeah. I can't do it. I'm embarrassed myself. Let's move on to the next song, Caruso. Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
Those are some easy drums.
So this song actually has a lot of the trappings of the X that I love, and on this particular recording, I love how huge the bass drums sound. It's like, but you hear that scrapey guitar, which I assume might be Terry Hessels, who's he now is the only founding member still in the band. I think they've been around this is their 42nd year of existence. But there's this like really cool plucking that Tom Cora does on the cello. So it's sort of like, you know, it almost has a guitar feel, but it's such a weird marriage of instrumentation.
Yeah, you know what's really funny about this? Like, so I thought this immediately from putting on the record from the very beginning. I didn't know who Tom Cora was, so I was surprised to learn that he was a cello player. Because I'm like, okay, so here's this featured cello player with this band, so obviously everything I'm hearing, it must be cello, but I thought it was violin at first.
Oh, right, yeah. So Tom Cora, what I know about him is he played cello, but he played electrified cello, and he would run it like through different effects pedals,
right.
like loop different parts, but also he would use it as a percussion instrument. He would bang on it, you know, he would play on the other side of the bridge to get like really like shrill tones. He was just a really interesting and really progressive player.
Yeah.
And that kind of, you know, I never really discovered jazz music until, you know, fairly recently in my life. But he sort of started to lead me to, you know, not necessarily jazz, but like a lot more of like the avant-garde, like, you know, sort of like John Zorn. And so I have a little bit of a funny story. Tom Cora put out a record called Gumption in Limbo, which is solo cello. And it came out in 1991, the same year as Scrabbling at the Lock. And so when I was in 1991, I think I was 17, 18, I don't know, something like that. No, I think I had just turned 55. Um, and I went to there was a record shop in Harvard Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts called HMV. Do you remember that? It was like His Master's Voice. It's
okay.
It's an English chain. It was really shitty record shop, but they had a department, and they would always, if you wanted to special order import records, they would do it. So I loved this record so much that I had read somewhere about Tom Cora's solo record, Gumption in Limbo, and I went and ordered it.
Mm-hmm.
And after a month, it didn't come in. After like 2 months, didn't come in. And I just forgot about it. I was like, all right, they can't get it. Over a year later, I got a call from the record store, and they were like, hey, your CD's in. And I was like, what? They're like, Tom Cora's Gumption in Limbo. And I was like, holy shit. So of course I rushed there to get it, and I listened to it, and it's so interesting. Like some of the sounds that he got from just like playing cello were it's a really cool record. If you can ever check that one out, it's really good. So
Okay.
that that was another turning point where I was like, okay, you can take an instrument and not play it traditionally. Like the whole idea of an instrument is to generate sound, and however you generate sound from it, be it like, I mean, Terry from the X, there's a video of them playing in Utrecht where he's just hitting the guitar with a hammer. And, that was always pretty influential also.
Yeah.
That, I don't know, you like drill your guitar or like throw it on the floor, and like, that's your part in the song. So,
Right.
So yeah, but yeah, like, so I do think like a lot of times what Tom Cora does, like it does sound like violin or like viola, or sometimes it even sounds like guitar when he's just like, straight up.
Two things. Because of the story that you just mentioned, I don't think that you were part of it, but that first Neptune record, the Studios series.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a lot of smashed bottles in that record.
There is. Yes.
So who plays a smashed bottle?
This guy named Doug Last.
Okay.
He is the only former, current, whatever member of Neptune. I've only met Doug once. My friend Carl, who came over, who was the original bassist the other night, they're really close. So what he did was he had like a Rubbermaid trash barrel,
Yeah.
a cinder block in it that had a microphone, and he just smashed bottles on the cinder block. And so on that record, he's credited as, I think, percussion and empties.
Do you know how many bottles he smashed in that record? Because it's over a number of songs. It's not just one song.
No, it's like almost on every song.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I can find out.
All right. No, I just picking your brain. Getting back to this song, so Caruso, according to the lyrics, which there are very few to this long song, basically seems to be about a person just kind of struggling with sleep.
Right.
It's fairly self-explanatory. So, Tor can be an awful place to try to catch some sleep. What is one of the worst places you've had to sleep on tour?
Oh shit! I don't even know where to start.
Just one. I know there's many, because it's like every day there's a some horrible disaster.
Okay, so Neptune played a show in a town called Kran, Slovenia.
Sounds good already.
I mean, Slovenia is awesome. It's a beautiful country, but we played in this building that was a former Olympic. I think like the Olympics in maybe like the 80s or something were in Kran, Slovenia, and so this building it housed an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and then it had like another like sort of side room, which these people squatted, and they made the side room into a bar. And the Olympic-sized swimming pool was made into like, there was like, all these like skateboard ramps and shit, and kind of like, it was kind of cool. The place had no bathroom, and it also, the only heat was in the large room where the pool was a diesel generator that all of the diesel fumes were just coming into both rooms, and then they had like a wood burning stove which was leaking smoke into the room.
Nice.
So at the time we were there, it might have been like, it was either very early spring or early fall, and it was really damp and really disgusting. And I remember like we slept basically on the floor of the bar in sleeping bags, and we had to keep the fire going to not freeze to death or get hypothermia or whatever. And I remember like trying to fall asleep, and I was like, I'm not going to wake up.
Yeah, you're going to die of like carbon monoxide poisoning.
Die of carbon monoxide poisoning. So to make matters worse, we had a day off the next day, and the guy who set up the show was awesome. This guy was rad, and he was like, "Oh, of course, you stay here." And I was like, no fucking way. I was like, no way. And so by the second night, that was one of those times where I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I here? And that was bad. But I also just remembered the second most terrifying place I have ever stayed. And this was actually in Utrecht, however you say it, in the Netherlands. And we played in a squat that was an old furniture building that had a massive fire in the 80s and basically gutted the building. So a bunch of people squatted it, and they did like some DIY construction, and they were like, you're going to sleep up here. So we're basically going up these these like stairs that were kind of like hobbled together. They did a nice job on the stairs, but there was plywood all over these charred beams. The beams were like not big. They were not. Yeah. They didn't look sturdy.
And burnt through.
And we were like 3 stories up. And I remember, and there were other people sleeping on the floor. And I just remember like going to bed, thinking to myself, I'm like, I hope I fall asleep before I plummet to my death. that was, I mean, there's been a lot, but those were 2 that come to mind.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good. I that's just what I was hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, in like, for Neptune, I would say for all of the times that we toured and played, I would say the amount of times we actually rented a hotel room were under 5. Certain places would get you a hotel room, which was cool. That was fine.
But spending your own money to get one.
Yeah, we just we couldn't afford it. Yeah, we're all broke.
Right. Yeah, it's got to go into the gas tank.
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of the shows you play, like, you're going to play like some weird place in the middle of like, Idaho or something that like, okay, we can give you a show on a Tuesday night and maybe get you some gas money, but that's about it.
Right.
So, yeah, if you're, if you don't have a place to stay, then you're kind of shit out of luck, as they say.
Right. That's right. All right, let's move on to the next song. Let's listen to The Flute's Tale.
This is a good one.
Another one with a very long interlude.
Every song on this record is
yeah, like I said, a lot of music, very little words.
So the opening of this song encapsulates pretty much everything I love about the X, because you have Katrin's like really interesting drumming. There's like some woodblock and like bells, whatever she's playing, and then that piercing what I think is probably like Terry's guitar, and then Andy comes in with this sort of melodic line, and then the bass playing. It's just like everything, it layers in, but it's all so weird, and it doesn't really work, but it works.
It's got a very very moderate like groove to it. Like it like teeters on like a funk or like a soul maybe, with like a weird European folky jangle to it. Yeah.
And I actually love the lyrics of this song because it's called The Flute's Tale. So the last three lines are, the emperor, he knew it, and what did he do? He blew it. And I remember I was like, oh, that's so good. That's such
Well, the two verses prior to that, those three lines that you just mentioned, is basically what seems to be a very kind of cut and dry, like kind of a folktale. It's kind of like sounds similar to like The Emperor's New Clothes or something like that, where he says, and in its reflection he could see things, happiness, laughter, a child that sings, but he'd better watch it. He should not touch it. The happiness would fade, the laughter would die. The singing child would start to cry. And then there's those three lines, and with ending with him saying he blew it, just being like, he knew it was going to happen. What does he do? He blows it anyway.
It definitely is like their take on the Emperor's new clothes,
Yeah. There are something similar to that, but so that's what led me to wonder, what is your favorite fable?
I don't know if I have one.
Favorite lesson in one of those like nursery rhyme fables?
This is more of a novel, but I've always loved, and this, I think I said when we were talking, like the first band I ever am obsessed with when I was 10 years old or 11 years old was the Smiths.
Mm-hmm.
The lead singer, who's a bit of a dude, was really inspired by Oscar Wilde. So that led me to start reading Oscar Wilde. And I still love The Picture of Dorian Gray, even though it's a novel. I mean, it's basically, it's about vanity, and I got a lot from that book. I thought that was pretty great. Have you read it? Do you know it?
Mm-mm. No, I'm not literate. I don't read really. There's very few novels I've ever read. The ones that I have, are very near and dear to me.
Right.
There's a number of ones on my list that I've just kind of never gotten to, and now, especially with the new business and the podcast and doing this research and shit, I don't have time.
Basically, there's a portrait of this guy,
Dorian Gray. Yeah.
And he's a very vain person, and he sort of makes this deal where he never ages, but the portrait does.
So is vanity like a bad thing? Is that what it helps you realize, that it's kind of a detrimental perspective?
Kind of like a vain dick, and
a veiny dick? Is that what it is?
He's a veiny dick.
Yeah, that sounds brutal. That sounds harsh.
That's a really good stage name. My next band, I'm going to be called Veiny Richard.
Sure. Yeah. Take it.
I'm not describing the novel well, so but in terms of fables, I think that one would be my favorite, I guess.
So what did you learn from it though? What is the lesson?
Not to be a veiny dick.
Oh, not to be a veiny dick. Okay.
You can have one.
You can have one, sure. I mean, and most of us do. I mean,
not be one.
It gets worse as you get older. I see.
Yeah, definitely.
You might consider that better. I'm not sure. It just depends on your perspective. All right, let's move on. For now, let's move on to a door. right, that's cool.
So that to me, that totally showcases how much of a badass drummer Katrin is. Like, I love that drum line. It's so damn good. I love it.
Yeah, that one stuck out to me today when I was listening to it. I was just like, oh yeah, listen to that.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Definitely. Cool. So now this song is a little interesting because it actually seems, lyrically speaking, to be a kind of a terribly depressing song, but with like this weird jangly rock veneer.
Right.
So you don't necessarily kind of hear how sad it is.
That's pretty cool of a lot of their songs. Like, lyrically, since a lot of them were political in nature, and I think Yost often would focus on like social injustice, and whether it was like past and present. A lot of their lyrics are really heavy and really sad.
So aside from the political tinge to that this song has to it, I was going to ask you, what doors would you say that joining Neptune opened for you?
Oh, man. Many. It was, well, I mean, first and foremost, it was, opening a door to like lifelong friendships with people who I truly and genuinely love and will always be a part of my life. And, it's just like such good people. I've learned so much from everybody involved, like whether it be like musically, he's going to kill me for saying this, but Jason, I used to kind of call him, he was sort of like the dad of Neptune. Jason's a very, very, very smart guy. And he, there would be times when I'd be like, I don't understand this. And he would like, explain it to me. And like, he turned me on to, like building stuff. And it also like, it opened doors where I got to meet people that I admired. Like we played with the X 3 times. We got to play with David Yao of the Jesus Lizard, who was like another, they were mad for me. Yeah. But I think one of the biggest doors it opened was like, going on all these tours, and I keep in contact with so many people I met at shows, either whether they put on shows or we just like hit it off. So, that really, like, I think the friendship element, the people that I met, the stuff that I learned, the places that I got to travel to, were like, those were huge door openings for me. So yeah, I mean, I guess like it even culturally taught me a lot. It also challenged me to be a better musician. I don't know. It's definitely my time in Neptune is definitely some of the best times of my life, and always will be. And again, like the friendship, like Jason and Mark are, two of the, I hold them in the highest regard. Like if anything ever happened, if I ever needed anything, or if I had a question or whatever, like, those guys are always there, and they're always,
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds it. That's beautiful, man.
Yeah, I love it.
All right, well, let's move on. We have to get into Prapadada. Good call on that.
See, that one's awesome, because that really has the call and response between Yost and Catherine. And again, like like the just the propulsion of the music. It's primarily rhythmic, but you have these melodic, like things happening over it. They're kind of like swimming over all of the percussive elements. And these lyrics are pretty interesting. It is a smile on your lips, a song in your heart, a skull in your pocket, and fear was in everybody's bones. A right to piss and shit in different colors.
Yeah, those last lines really messed me up. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Like, I don't know. I mean, I know they mean something, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I think lyrically this song kind of plays with the idea that like the title of the song is blending two words, and I think the two words that they're blending lyrically they are trying to address.
Right.
So it's propaganda and probably dada as in like the art form.
Right.
So propadada as in, so this is propaganda, smile on your lips, song in your heart, skull in your pocket.
Right.
And fear was in everybody's bones. And then that right to piss and shit in different colors is kind of like what's just turning it right there into a little bit of like obscurity, right?
All right.
Listen, we're going to move on to another song. I don't want to do, I want to do Batium.
Well, that one's really cool. Okay.
Yeah. Let's do Batium. Stop.
I love that song. So Tom Cora's cello playing on that is incredible, and that's another. So that's a traditional Turkish folk song. That song it's so great, and that's another one that really started to pique my interest in. I guess I would say world music. I mean, the X overall really, in this era, they were very inspired by Eastern European folk music, and then later on, they were really inspired by Ethiopian and a lot of like African music. And I mean, to me, it seems like Katrin, the drummer, has probably always been a fan of like African music, just because of the way she plays.
Yeah.
So, when you talk about like opening doors, the X opened so many doors for me to just like check out other kinds of music.
Right.
And I don't know the origins of this Turkish song, but my husband and I went to Istanbul about 5 years ago, and it was like I've always been really obsessed with the Middle East. So going to Istanbul, I went to a bunch of record stores and got as many like old Turkish records as I could, and some really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the best ones I found. I can't pronounce I could pronounce the name, but I'm not going to do it correctly. But it's two guys, and one's. I don't even know the instrument that they're holding, but it was just described as Turkish disco folk. And I was like, I don't even give a shit. I'm buying this record because, yes, this is, this is what I want to hear.
It sounds like it will be gold.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's not very folk. It's more like Turkish disco on folk instruments, I guess.
So listen, about this song, I just wanted to touch on some of the information you shared with me. As enigmatic as I found this album to be, you sharing some of the liner notes with me was hugely helpful. So I'm not going to get into the entire description that they list on the record about this song, but just touching on it, it just says that their description of Batium is a beautiful and touching dedication to Ismet Siral, who was the person who basically wrote this song, I guess, right? So yeah, it looks like Tom Cora was the one that wrote this dedication, and it's kind of describing the dedication to him, and kind of like how he kind of came, this short life that he had, and
like his journey.
Yeah, and the impact that he and these songs that he had made had on him and probably so many other people.
Right.
So my question for you is, do you think that you have anything in your, let's just say, discography now that would be like maybe your landmark? Have you reached one of those yet?
I don't. That is a really good question and a really difficult question.
Right.
Because I've always struggled with the idea of like importance.
Yeah.
Music. So I don't really know how to answer that. I would say, like, I know I keep talking about this, but I would say the most recent Neptune record we released, Mother of Millions, is, I listened to that, and this is going to sound totally douchey and weird, but I listen to that all the time. I love it. And if I ever want to, let's say, 100 years from now, if anybody ever discovers any music that I've ever made, I would love it to be that, because we really we really tried very hard to make it as unlistenable as possible.
Yeah. Well, see, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that there's anything douchey about, just kind of appreciating something that you have created, and to be able to acknowledge that, like, especially because how much went into it. Anyone from any other outsider's perspective, you just see it as like, okay, well, here's the newest record, throw it on the pile.
Right.
And they're never going to know, like, what kind of work went into making that record happen.
I mean, I feel that way about a lot of projects that I was involved in. So a band I've been playing in currently, Lay Feeling, with my friend Tom, we started like just making these sort of, more ambient compositions, and both of us had the thought, we were like, who wants to see two fucking dudes twiddle knobs? This is boring. Like, so Mark from Neptune actually was, he was in Providence, for work. And so we were like, hey, would you come check out just check out what we're doing and tell us if it sucks, So he was, no, it's awesome, but you guys should do something visual. And, so what we started doing was live scoring queer and feminist film. And so the first record we did, which is called A Delphinium Blue Upon Your Grave, which is a line from a Derek Jarman film. There's a song on there that it's called Shadow is the Queen of Color, which is also from a Derek Jarman book. I don't know if you're familiar with Derek Jarman, but he was an experimental English filmmaker. He died of AIDS in 1994, but he was just like the most outside thinker in terms of everything. He was an avid gardener. He was a painter. He was a set designer. He was a filmmaker. He's just one of the most inspirational people in my life. And this song we made, I still think, like, I hear it and I'm like, oh shit, I can't believe we made that song. Like, that is really cool. Yeah. So I love that. And then I was in a band for a while called Golden Shores with a friend of mine, and we did a record that is kind of all based on how religions don't intersect. And part of it was based on my trip to Istanbul, where my husband and I went into this place called the Hagia Sophia, which started as a pagan temple. And then, over the course of hundreds of years, it went from like a Christian church to a Muslim mosque, and back and forth and back and forth. And then it went into there was no like religious jurisdiction. It became a museum. Erdogan has actually now made it back into a mosque, but we were in there, and during a renovation, there was it was uncovered these like frescoes of like the Virgin Mary, and on either side were these like amazing like Arabic symbols. And we were in there with a tour guide, and he like, this almost brought me to tears, because he was like, do you guys think that like when the lights shut off that like, they talk to each other? And they were like, how did everyone get it so wrong? Why? Like, and I was like, holy shit. So I spent months mixing that record, and it's like, I took like, there's actually bits that there's elements I recorded in a church in Galway, Ireland, of these women praying, and then I recorded what is called the Adhan, which is the Muslim call to prayer. I think Adhan is the Turkish term for the Muslim call to prayer. So I just like, I really wanted to like intersect all of these different religious elements and have it be sort of like this meditation on like, the idea of religion being, acceptance and love, but none of them get along. And they like organized religion causes like more harm and destruction than anything. So I was really proud of the way that came out. So yeah, nice. I know.
I have a sub question for you.
Okay.
And so based on what we were talking about earlier, the content of this story, the kind of the story of this instrumental song, and what I asked you, what would you like people to say at your funeral about you?
Oh, I've thought about this a lot.
Okay, good.
This is great. So I, for many years, worked at a trust and estates law firm. And, so that means like we write wills and trusts, and like it was kind of hard to deal with, because basically you're mostly dealing with a lot of wealthy, horrible people. But, seeing what different people wanted at their funerals or their memorial service was kind of eye-opening, and a lot of it was really cheesy. So I asked my nephew. My nephew is a musician. He played in a band called Wet, and he also like he recently was playing with Arto Lindsay, like doing some weird. Arto Lindsay?
No.
He was in DNA. He's like
okay.
Like a no wave kind of. It's so funny because my nephew like so nonchalantly was like, "Yeah, man, I'm like with Arto Lindsay," and I was like, "What the fuck? Like, who are you? How did this happen?" So I asked him, I was like, when I pass away, I want you to do something for me. And I want to be cremated, and I want my ashes placed into vinyl records, because there was a place that was doing it. And then aside from that, I was like, I want no religion at all. So yeah, like if my ideal, memorial service would be people hanging out, having fun, listening to music, and that's it.
Okay. So having your ashes pressed into records, what record would you press with those ashes?
So I thought a lot about this, and initially I was thinking like I wanted to pick a favorite song from every band I've ever played in. But,
so like a compilation record.
But I've never been a person to release music under my own name. Like I don't love doing solo stuff. Like I really love collaboration, and like not every idea is a good idea. So it's great when you play with other people and they're like, maybe not that, but like let's do this and whatever. But what I decided I was doing, I call it the Requiem record. I've been slowly making songs that I want pressed on this record.
Okay.
So So
you put a lot of thought into this. Okay.
The idea is like, I really in my lifetime never want to release a record under my name, but I want one released under my name after I'm dead. And it's just going to be all this weird shit that I've like recorded over the years. And it's funny because I asked my nephew, I'm like, hey, are you cool doing this? And he's like, absolutely. And, so I think, a couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with hepatitis C, and I had no idea I guess I had it for 20 years. I had no clue that I had hepatitis C. So, now that I'm like in my 40s and, have a potential, had a potential life-threatening disease, I was like, oh shit, our time here is super limited. Like in the grand scheme of things, like we're like just not even a blip on the radar, So that's kind of what really got me thinking about this. And, I mean, even though I said like my dad was kind of a dick, my dad was so anti-religion, and they had this memorial service for him where he was like, God's child, and like my dad would have fucking he would have been so pissed off if he heard that. So that kind of got me thinking. I'm like, yeah, I want none of this. I want people to just have fun because, nobody lives forever. We're here for a short period of time. Get together, remember the fun stuff, and, and just learn and move on.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. I mean, I agree with you. That sounds like a great time and a great way to honor somebody instead of doing the typical religious bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm like, I feel bad saying that. Like, I'm really not anti-religion. Like, if it works.
No, I mean, I think it makes sense because, okay, you're obviously you're obviously a fun person. I think that you obviously care a lot about people. You don't want to bore the fuck out of somebody, having them show up to a church, having to get dressed up all in black and go through that whole rigmarole of disposing of a body.
I want it to be a theme party. Like, I mean, maybe everyone can dress in black, but it's going to be fucking Goth Night and Joy Division and Bauhaus, and like that I feel like would be, that would be fitting. and
Dan Boucher's latest solo release, or debut solo release.
In the vinyl.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a great time.
I've spent so much time thinking about that recently, and it like, not even recently. I mean, it's been like 4 years now. And it's funny, like, my nephew, who is my oldest sister's child, he's just like, he's amazing. He's just such a free thinker. I asked him, and he's like, I'm fine. So the other thing that I was thinking about is I want to have everybody I've either played in a band with or I've ever really admire play something on the record. So even if it's one note, I'll somehow fit it in. And so that will be my first and only solo record.
Whoa. Heavy, man. All right, Dan, we have to move on, unfortunately. All right, well, here's Fire and Ice.
He who calculates with a bad memory, he who tells lies from lies apart, he who wants to compare evil with evil, deserves the war he gets. Sharpen their pencils, like a military, sharpen their bayonets. On balances of power, they lay corpses by the million, they divide fear by honor, and deduct radiation from profit. Leaves in the red.
Okay.
So,
Fire and Ice.
Fire and Ice. The reason this song I think is interesting is this song kind of makes me I really loved Yoss's delivery. He was just like, he had such a great delivery, but the thing that's really interesting about this song is it's actually the X covering themselves. Because
okay.
this song appeared on a record called Blueprints for a Blackout, which I think was their first double record. And that one was like when they, I mean, they've always been weird, and they've always been about like, taking like massive turns. I thought it was kind of cool that like, the band was covering themselves.
Yeah.
But I mean, they bring new life to it. Like with having Tom Cora, like he doesn't necessarily play like the guitar parts. He does his own thing. But this song, if you read the lyrics, this song is really heavy. And to me, what I think it's about is, I mean, it's obviously about racism in a way. It's about war, but it seems like it's about genocide.
Okay.
It's like it's definitely it's there's a lot to unpack lyrically in this song.
Yes, I think so.
And that is something that like I really took from Fire and Ice. I think it's really cool that you can revisit your older songs and, like breathe new life into them, I guess, in a way.
Right.
So yeah, so I found that pretty interesting.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, this song, I mean, aside from that perspective of yours, I mean, like, I find it, like you were saying, very difficult to kind of comprehend the lyrics completely. I mean, I think that it seems obviously overtly political. I'm not sure exactly which, like historical situations he's mentioning exactly, because I'm just not big on history, and I don't know them well enough. So
Right.
It's hard for me to kind of, pinpoint things about this song and these words.
So the lyrics in this song are, how do you compare bad with bad? Do you subtract dead Salvadorians from dead Iraqis? Do you subtract Chileans from poisoned Kurds? And with whom do you exchange the exterminated Vietnamese?
Right. So it sounds like a couple of weird, like a couple of like, not necessarily war, but like, possibly genocidal situations.
Genocidal, it seems, like, I mean, the Kurds basically throughout history have just been continually fucked. And they like, now again, like Erdogan in Turkey, basically, I mean, there's almost another like Kurdish genocide happening right now. And, so they like right the same year that the X put out Scrabbling at the Lock, they did this single subscription series. And one of them was with a Kurdish musician. And the idea from what I got from that single was about this like Kurdish genocide. Again, not really like at the time that I found this, I didn't know much about politics. I guess I didn't know much about, the world. And this really started teaching me about that kind of stuff. So.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I'll have to get into it myself now.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, so the thing about the X is they are like, I have two bands that like I always revisit and I always hear something new, and it's like the X and Autechre. And I mean, completely different musical styles, but after not listening to a certain record for like a year or two, I go back and like I always hear it differently. There's always something else I can pull out from it. And whether it's like, stuff I've learned, or maybe like a melody I hadn't heard before. I love the idea that music can be that sort of thing, like the gift that keeps on giving, if you will. Yeah. Like it's always, I mean, even these recorded versions are the recorded versions. They somehow like they change to me. Right. Like, yeah, I pick up different things. And I think a lot of why that happens with the X is like it's so musically dense. There is so much happening in every song. you know, like a lot of times I'll listen to it and I'll just like focus on the rhythms, and then I will focus on the guitars, and then, you know, focus on the lyrics. So they, you know, I one thing about the X that kind of bums me out is I feel like they should be huge. I feel like people like they should be so much more well known. And I mean, maybe it's kind of cool that they're not, but I think for like what they've accomplished in their, you know, in their, I guess 42-year run is it's massive. It's huge, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I'm only discovering them now because of you, and I mean, I'd have to say I agree. I mean, it's like from what I've heard of them so far, and I haven't listened to everything. It's it's compelling and interesting music for sure.
yeah, they're great.
Yeah.
You know,
So-
again, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say we gotta move on to the last song.
Okay.
This Sukiana, I believe that's how you say it.
Yep.
Wild.
It's so interesting. I mean, there are a couple times when, you know, even in the first like 30 seconds of that song, I'm like, what is making that sound? What is where is that coming from?
Right.
Yeah, they like, yeah, I can't say enough about how much this band changed my life and how much I, you know, I like, I love them. I hold them in such high regard.
Yeah. With
like,
good reason.
Yeah.
So
They,
now you shared with me some, you know, obviously the liner notes of the record, and so for this song, which is an instrumental, as you were saying, it gives a little story about who Suskiana is, like the little background of her. So let me just kind of get through this quickly. Sukiana, granddaughter of Muhammad, was militant, good-looking, and of great intelligence and spiritual strength. Next to that, she was also very brave. In Medina, she was a star. Women admired her, and the most important men competed for her hand. She married 5 of them. Many Arabs and Muslims still fear her influence, although she's been dead now for 14 centuries. She refused to wear a veil and recorded by law that men and women had equal rights. However, that decision was abolished 100 years later. Even nowadays, Arab historians are fascinated by her courage. And that is a quote from Fatima Mernissi, a historian in March 1991's issue of Emma, a German woman's monthly. That's an amazing story. It's an amazing piece of history that I had no knowledge of whatsoever. So my final question for you is, who is one of your female idols?
oh shit, I have so many. I don't even know where to start.
Okay, just start with one, because I have another question for you after that.
Okay, so female idols. I guess this is gonna sound cheesy, but the biggest was my mom. My mother was the most amazing human. She, you know, she was very just open-minded, very cool. She always, you know, she always told me to like follow my heart, follow my dreams, you know, whereas my dad was like, oh, you can't do music. That's for, you know, that's for fairies, and, you know, you're not going to make a living. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. My mom was like, if you love it, that's what you should do. I took a lot from that. Katharina Bornfield, the drummer of the X, is like also, you know, one of my like biggest
Musical idols, maybe you could say.
heroes. but I don't know. There are a ton.
Yeah.
I was raised by women. I was raised by all women. My dad, like I said earlier, this is probably the third time I'm mentioning what a dick he was. My dad left when I was 11.
Uh-huh.
I have 3 older sisters and a brother, and I was raised by my sisters mostly and my mom. So, you know, they were all such just like strong, independent, smart, awesome people that they essentially taught me not to be an asshole. And
Right.
you know, that's like the best thing you can learn in life, I think. So
It's certainly an important lesson. So my follow-up question to you is, and how do you feel about the female representation in the music industry today?
I don't feel great about it. Yeah, I think it's, you know, this is also like another thing that I feel weird saying, but another formative band to me that like I really loved was Unwound. And, you know, one of my favorite drummers is Sarah Lund from Unwound. She's fucking awesome. And I mean, that's another one where like I can point out so many times on different records that I've made where I blatantly ripped off Sarah. It was just like, you know, it was awesome in the early 90s or the mid to late 90s to see like, you know, women in bands, and not only just like, you know, like a vocalist, but just like just such a kick-ass drummer, like so powerful and so amazing. I don't know. I don't think there's, I don't know. I wish there were more women in rock, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel it's, you know, I feel rock and roll, or like, I hate saying that, but I feel like the music industry is so male dominated, and it's so, like, a lot of it is like so testosterone fueled that like, ugh, fucking boring. Like,
Right. Now, but you gave a couple of examples of like women musicians, particularly drummers, who are like their style of playing, the bands that they are part of, are like these great like rock bands, like even in a heavier realm. Like it's just kind of nice to know that as few as there may be, that at least they have the ability to, you know, kind of like rub elbows with the men, being able to play as hard or as intensely as any man could.
Right. You know, one really great experience is we didn't really get to talk about this, but Neptune got to play the X's 25th anniversary at the Paradiso in Amsterdam.
Right.
And one of the bands that blew my fucking mind was Electrolane. And I don't know if you know them, but
No.
they're like, you know, the way the X described them is like, you know, they're like a female pop band. And they were and they weren't. Like, they were, that band was so awesome. And it was great to just see like women on stage, like, you know, just so confident and so amazing. And they were like, we actually ended up becoming good friends with them. Like, they were so, it was just like, I mean, it shouldn't be a rarity that you see a bunch of like, you know, like female bands. Like, why is that? You know, I don't know. It's really weird, but I don't know. There's like, you know, there's a ton of local musicians in Providence who really inspire the hell out of me. Female musicians that, you know, I think like one thing that's really great is, you know, Riot, Rhode Island, that used to be Girls Rock. That's such an awesome program. A good friend of mine, former bandmate, his daughter went through the Girls Rock in Boston, and like it had such a positive impact on her life, that, you know, still playing music, which is great. So I don't know. Yeah, I do. Like, I kind of hate the I hate music being like, the old boys club, but I do. It's changing. It's the pace is not as fast as I hope it would be, but it's definitely changing. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like many of the other like kind of inequalities that are happening in the world right now. It's just like there are a lot more that are being brought to attention, being
Right.
more of a focal point, and obviously those marginalized groups are like, kind of making an effort to, push themselves while this momentum is building, I guess, kind
Right.
of.
I think it's true. Like
It's reality.
I used to have this friend Bob, and basically Bob was my friend because I used to buy weed off him, and this was in the '90s, and he was really into like grunge and shit, and so I would just like I'd go over and we'd like smoke weed and we'd talk about like fucking stupid records of the time, and Smashing Pumpkins came up, and he was like, I won't listen to them. And I was like, why? He's like, it's a girl in a band. Girls shouldn't be in bands. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like,
Wow.
you're like, what? That's so stupid. You're such an idiot. And I actually really liked the first two Smashing Pumpkins records a lot.
Yeah.
I was like, you're a fucking dick. You have no, like, yeah.
And you never bought weed from him again.
That
Yeah,
is-
well, we won't go that far, but yeah, we had strong words.
But just like that mentality is so fucking weird to me, like I don't get it. I've experienced a lot of that shit, like just being a gay man. I remember this woman I worked with was like, oh, I used to like Queen, but I found out they were gay. And I was like, well, first of all, there was one member of the band that was gay. And why does that matter? Like Freddie Mercury was fucking amazing. He was like great,
Yeah.
But it's just weird that people will like, like just because one member was known to be gay, that like the whole band is gay and I'm not going to listen to them because they're faggots, or like, I mean, it's just like it's so stupid. So I don't know. There's a lot of that shit that I don't know. It's really disheartening.
Yeah. No, I agree. I just wanted to kind of get your opinion on it, considering this closing track was so kind of like heavily stymied in like this acknowledgement to this influential woman who obviously has kind of gone unknown now after all these centuries.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, to me, like my whole musical journey is really inspired by three very important women in my life. So the reason I play music is because of women. So, my sister Denise bought me my first drum set when I was 3, as I said. My mom also, just being like, she was so rad. She was always like, yeah, if you want to play drums, like do it. You can practice in the basement. You can do whatever you want. She was like, you have to do what makes you happy. And the biggest turning point in my musical life before I found the X was my brother, whom I love dearly. My brother's awesome. He's like, we're kind of like the same person, except he's a lot more Republican than I am. And in like, I think 1985 or 1986, he started dating this woman, Ellen, who I'm still friends with. I love her to death.
Yeah.
And she was so cool because like she'd show up at the house and she'd have like a fucking prom dress on and like checkered, like shaved in like the side of her hair. And she was like, why are you listening to this classic rock? This stuff sucks, man. Here. She's like, I'm going to turn you on to some like really good music. So she gave me a cassette she made. One side was the Dead Kennedys' Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables. And the other side was the Smiths' Meat is Murder. And that really, really, really changed my life because I was like, shit, music can be, so much more scary or like emotive. And, with the Smiths, like it, as much as Morrissey's a douchebag, and we've talked about this before, but like, as a young gay kid growing up in a really like homophobic kind of environment, I felt like I was not alone, and then like the Dead Kennedys, I was like, I've never heard anything like this. So that set me on a path of like seeking out like every weird shit, like all like the like the most challenging music I could find. Like Bauhaus, Joy Division, all that kind of stuff. So Ellen had a major impact on my life.
Yeah, that's great. Well, listen, hey, we've been talking a fuck long time, but it's been such a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for introducing the X to me.
Of course.
I appreciate it. So what have you got on prospects coming up? Probably with Wrong Whole, I imagine.
There's a bunch. Oh my God, there's a bunch of stuff. So the next thing coming out is Alec Redfern's actual full length with his Doom project.
Okay.
Which I really love. And then, well, obviously, Brent Frattini. Brent is in a band that I really love called Infrastructure Rot. And they did a record in quarantine because the drummer now lives in Taipei. Sean was in Boston. Brent was here. And the record they did in quarantine is the best thing they've done. It's sick. So they did a just like a digital version. So I'm going to do a cassette version. And then I have TK, which is Talia Zedek's kind of noise band with her girlfriend and this guy that was in Uzi. I got coming up. So there's a bunch of stuff. There's a bunch of stuff. I'm really excited about Alec's record. I think it's so good. I think his stuff is great. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, you can't go wrong. All right, Dan. Hey, listen, it's been great talking to you.
It's been good talking to you, buddy.
Thank you for the time. I really appreciate it.
Yes, appreciate it. Thank you for having me. All right, have a good night.
All right, Dan. You too. I'll see ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Go way down underground. Go ground.
Vinyl and Vision is a Second Static production. Theme song written and performed by Jeff Robbins of 123 Astronaut.